What's going on, everybody? We're live. Let's go ahead and sharing out the socials on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So make sure you guys go ahead and share the link to the stream so everyone can check it out. Hope you guys are enjoying your Sunday morning so far. It is a rainy day here in Cleveland. So again, I would like to welcome you guys to the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Again, I just want to thank you guys for coming out. Just doing one last check to make sure that everything is up and running. And everyone, it is time to go. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And how you guys doing? My name is Sean Stevenson. I am the host of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Thank you guys so much for coming. It is week 1 of the NFL season, and I am so excited. First off, we get Cleveland Browns football back. I know with everything going on with the pandemic, things have been crazy. I hope you and your family have been able to stay safe during this time. No matter where you are, if you're in Ohio, if you're in a nearby state, if you're on the West Coast or even in another country, just enjoying Browns football, make sure you stay safe, enjoy the time with your family, and root for the Cleveland Browns. Now, as you guys know, it is week 1 of the 2020 NFL season. It started off on Thursday with the Chiefs against the Texans. And again, the Super Bowl defending Chiefs, they show why they're one of the best teams in NFL, answering with 31 unscored points after the Texans went up 7-0. And now we finally get the Cleveland Browns back on Sunday with a 1 p.m. kickoff against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. And the last time these two teams met up, the Ravens did win 31-15. This was week 16 last season. And the perfect part is about this matchup is the last time that the Browns played, they actually gave the Ravens their last loss of the season back in week 4, where they dominated on the ground with Nick Chubb. And you can definitely expect the run game to be strong and back with a passion. So again, like I said, my name is Sean Stevenson. You can see my socials in the top and left right-hand corners of the screen. SHWN Stevenson, basically my name without an A. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Just go ahead and give me a follow. I do follow back. Just make a bigger community in order for people to enjoy the show as much as possible. So let's hop straight into it. So again, week 1, Baltimore Ravens, M&T Bank Stadium, Baltimore, Maryland. This is a great way for the Browns to start off their season. One, you're going against a division rival in the Baltimore Ravens. You can't top that because you already know, given the circumstances that there was no OTAs because of the pandemic and there was a shorting training camp with no preseason games, the best way for you to basically guess where your team is and to measure the level of competitiveness that the Browns roster currently has is no better than the AFC North champion, which is the Baltimore Ravens from last season. They also have reigning MVP Lamar Jackson at quarterback. So comparing where the teams were at last season, you look at the Baltimore Ravens, they were 14-2. Again, the last loss they had in the season was week 4 against the Browns in Baltimore. And their average margin of victory last season was 15.6 points per game. That is huge. It was by far the highest of the league last season. So they were winning games in dominant fashion last season. One of the things that really propelled them to being the number 1 scoring offense last year was the fact that they had the number 1 running attack with over 3,200 yards, 3,296 total yards on the ground, both on the legs of Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and Lamar Jackson, which is just incredible. The fact that a quarterback was able to gain over 1,000 yards on the ground, another historic season. And you can definitely expect for Jim Harbaugh to continue running that offensive scheme that is built around Lamar Jackson. Now, one of the things that you have to look at as well, even though they were great at running the ball last season, the Ravens weren't that great at stopping the run. And you definitely saw that this offseason as they did change their roster around. But we'll get into the depth charts a little bit later into the show. Looking at that, they were the 30th ranked defensive attack on the run game. But again, when you're winning by such a strong margin of essentially 2 touchdowns each game, You don't really run against too many teams trying to throw the ball because obviously once you're down, teams do begin to throw. Looking at their team passing yards, threw for over 3,300 yards. So they're towards the bottom of the NFL when it comes into total passing yards. But again, when you're winning and you're leading early in the game, it is a lot easier for you to lean upon your run game. Now, looking at their passing yards, they did allow the 7th lowest amount in the league with over 3,400 yards. So the Baltimore Ravens had a strong secondary. Again, they struggled against the run, but when you're up, it is easier just to pound that clock and use that group of running backs that they have. Now, it's very important for us to look at the team while we're here. The Cleveland Browns. First-year head coach Kevin Stefanski, first-year general manager Andrew Berry. They're here and they're ready to make a difference. This is another, I don't want to say rebuild, but this is another innovation of the Browns front office. They have an opportunity to grow and essentially create a new perception of what the Browns are in the NFL. As you guys know, they dwelled in the cellar of the AFC North for so long, going 0-16 and 1-15 under Hugh Jackson when Sashi Brown was the general manager, who Andrew Berry actually worked with. So he was here earlier, and he understands the mistakes that were made. General manager John Dorsey did add some talent to the team, but again, last year with Freddie Kitchens as the head coach, just didn't see that success that you wanted the team to build on after going 7-8-1 2 seasons prior. Now it is important for Kevin Stefanski to create a new environment, a new winning culture in Cleveland, and bring the city of Cleveland that winner that it so deservedly needs. And looking at that, last year, the team was 12th in team rushing yards with over 1,900 yards, just barely, but they were actually in the lower end of attempts when it comes to actually running the ball. They were 21st in the league. So definitely you can expect the Browns to run more with Kevin Stefanski, be on the legs of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, who just recently signed a contract extension. So he will be in Cleveland for the longer haul. Now, looking at the rushing yards allowed, this was something that wasn't the greatest when it came to the Browns, seeing by the fact that they were actually one of the worst running teams in the NFL. Basically, teams could run over them whenever they wanted. I mean, the Browns averaged a 4.4 yards per carry anytime another team touched the ball. So obviously, one of the things the Browns have to do this season, and especially this game going against the Baltimore Ravens, is improving that run game. And as long as they can maintain their run fits, you can expect the Browns to improve on the ground game. And then lastly, obviously, the team is relatively strong when it comes to passing, allowing the 6th lowest mark last season for teams in passing yards allowed. So they only allowed 3,300 yards and some change. So you can definitely expect the Browns to improve in that over the season. But there is going to be a slight issue the first week of the season, seeing by the fact that the Browns have been bitten by the injury bug early in training camp. And unfortunately, they did lose 2nd-round pick Grant Delpit to injured reserve after getting hurt during training camp. And they're also losing some players this week to injury, and they'll be out. So let's actually carry over into the injury report this week. The Browns currently, they have center J.C. Tretter, who's questionable. He's likely going to start, seeing by the fact that he started early in the week with limited participation and was practicing during the week. He did go down during training camp early because he did have some knee issues going on, but he is likely to start. In his place during that time, Nick Harris, who's the 5th-round pick out of Washington, was taking majority of the first-team reps. So in a situation that J.C. Tretter's knee isn't up to the health that we expect it to be, we can feel confident with Nick Harris stepping in and giving us a serviceable job as a rookie at the center position. Also, cornerback MJ Stewart, who we signed, played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season, likely be our nickel back with Kevin Johnson being out due to a lacerated liver. We can expect MJ Stewart to play some snaps, definitely. He will probably be limited, having a hamstring issue, and he's going into the game questionable, but again, likely to play this week. Now, looking at our players that are out, we've already mentioned Kevin Johnson, who was essentially the first-team starting nickelback. He won't be playing this week. Also, we're going to be losing another cornerback in the secondary. Opposite of Denzel Ward, usually we see Greedy Williams. He's going to be out with a shoulder injury and was actually sitting out for a good portion of the training practices. another starter on the back end of that back seven. Linebacker Mack Wilson, currently dealing with a knee injury. Luckily, he doesn't have to have surgery. He's going to be out for this game as well. And then lastly, swing tackle Chris Hubbard, essentially left and right side if they wanted to bring in an extra tackle, or so they want to take out Jack Conklin or Jedrick Wheels for snaps. Chris Hubbard would likely be that man. But essentially, since he won't be there, you can expect Kendall Lamb to take over for those duties. Now, switching over to the Baltimore Ravens and looking at their injury report, they don't have as many players, but they do have 3 players that will be out. Also, offensive lineman Tyree Phillips, who's the rookie, he's questionable with the ankle. He's usually going to be their backup guard or right tackle or left tackle. It's going to be working all around that offensive line if he does play. But again, the ankle is very important to have good footwork for offensive linemen. So you'll definitely have to monitor that if he's on the field, if Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator for the Browns, will decide to attack him when he is on the field. Now, for the players that will be out for them, running back Justice Hill is out with a thigh injury. So, Ohio State Buckeye fans, I know you're probably wondering, will we see J.K. Dobbins this week? Likely we will, when they want to give Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards some rest. Also, going into the offensive position, look at wide receiver Chris Moore. He's going to be out with a finger injury. And then lastly, their rookie draft pick at the interior of the defensive line, defensive tackle Justin Madubuike. He's also going to be out with a knee injury. So again, I just want to thank you guys for coming out and joining the stream. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave it in the chat. I'm going to try to talk with you guys as much as possible. Again, this is the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Pregame Show, and there's not a tailgate without food, right? So I would actually like to go ahead and play you guys a quick video, which is going to be the tailgate recipe of the week. So let me go ahead and get that up for you guys. It's going to be great. I'm telling you, it's one of the best recipes I've ever made. So trust me, you're going to enjoy this. Let me go ahead and get this ready for you guys. And this is the tailgate recipe of the week. Let me go ahead and take that down. Full screen. And I hope you guys enjoy. Oh. Okay, so actually it looks like there was a little bit of a hiccup for the audio of the recipe of the week. Don't worry though. I will have it up on my Instagram page and on Twitter. You guys can just again follow me at SHWN Stevenson. You can hear the full audio. But the buffalo chicken dip, really easy recipe to make. Pretty much you mix up all those ingredients, you bake it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes, and then it's best you just garnish it with the bacon and the green onions at the end. But let's go ahead and get straight into the Browns depth chart. Obviously, the Browns are going to be starting quarterback Baker Mayfield, and behind him will be backup Chase Keenum. Going to the running back position, you can expect a lot of dose of Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and the third running back on the depth chart will be Ernest Johnson. Looking at the fullback position, the Browns and the Ravens actually are one of the few teams that like to run fullbacks in their offensive formations and schemes. With that, Andy Janovich is going to be our fullback for this week. Going on to the receiver position, you look at Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Kadero Hodge, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and JoJo Natson. Now, a lot of talk this week was about the tight end depth chart that the Browns released on their website, which has Austin Hooper. Then the second tight end in the depth chart, Harrison Bryant, who was actually named as the best rookie during training camp, is ahead of 2017 first-round pick David Njoku. But you can definitely expect both Harrison Bryant and David Njoku to be in plenty of snaps. And given the offensive scheme that Kevin Stefanski plans on running during this time, you can essentially exchange them out. The person who starts doesn't really give too much leaning of what the players will do, just understanding the type of players that they are. You can look at Harrison Bryant as more of an H-back type of tight end, with Njoku being more of your inline move tight end. And, of course, Austin Hooper is going to be your starter, getting the most of those minutes. And then finishing off with Steven Carlson. Looking at the offensive line, something that general manager Andrew Berry wanted to do and improve as much as possible with free agency in the NFL draft. So I'm starting at the left side of the line. Our offensive left tackle will be Jedrick Wheels, the rookie out of Alabama, the first round draft pick, number 10 overall. The Browns are expecting big things from him. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve with him switching from the right side of the offensive line from his time at Alabama, protecting Tua Tagovailoa's blind side. But with offensive line coach Bill Callahan, Browns fans, you can feel confident that Jedrick Wheels will make that transition. And if it means anything to you, one of the best offensive tackles of all time, Joe Thomas, said that he believes that he's the best tackle, that the prospect that the Browns could have got in the draft, and believe that he could be a franchise left tackle. Now, going into the interior, look at left guard Joe Betonio, who's been a staple on the Browns offensive line. Great player. He can be able to mentor Jedrick Wheels and provide some solid play against Calais Campbell, who's going to be on the opposite side for that Baltimore Ravens defensive line. Looking at center J.C. Tretter, again, dealing with a knee injury. We want to make sure that he's as healthy as possible. But in a situation that he is not, you can expect rookie fifth-round pick Nick Harris to step in and to take snaps at center after running with the first team during training camp. Now, looking at the right guard, a lot of people were expecting a right guard competition this offseason. But with last year's sixth-round pick Drew Forbes opting out of the season, Wyatt Teller will slide back in as the starting right guard. He was added from the Buffalo Bills last season, and he's a player that excels in pass blocking sets, so we can expect him to come in. And also, if there is anything that needs to be changed in terms of the interior, you can expect Evan Brown to play against the interior of the offensive line, whether it be at either guard spot or backup at center. And then lastly, one of the big free agent signings that the Browns made, Jack Conklin from the Tennessee Titans, will be the right tackle this week. You can expect him to be playing smash mouth in the trenches, giving us some of the best run blocking at the tackle position. And one of the best things is the past 2 years in Tennessee, he was actually blocking in a wide zone scheme. So you can expect him to essentially block very well, but open up those holes for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, which is going to be obviously really important. So one of the things that we have to talk about is, do I think the Browns have a chance at winning this game? And I'm going to say yes. One of the most important things is you have to make sure that teams actually have an opportunity to play at a high level, given by the fact that this is NFL and that any team has a chance to win on any given Sunday. Now, I know that a lot of betting favorites have the Baltimore Ravens winning, and obviously they were one of the better teams in AFC North last season, but this is a new season, a new coaching staff, a new offensive scheme, and one of the things that the Ravens struggled against last year was stopping the run. And obviously with Kevin Stefanski's new system, you can expect him to run the ball a lot. And as long as they can control the clock, I definitely believe the Browns have a high chance of winning this game in Baltimore. Now, going back to that depth chart, we look at Myles Garrett and the defensive line. Myles Garrett just extended this offseason, one of the best players in the league Myles Garrett is a straight up beast, and you can expect him to be getting after that quarterback and also being able to help contain Lamar Jackson. The more you can keep him in the pocket and not being able to use his legs as much will be definitely a key to getting a victory this week. Looking at the opposite side of the defensive line, the other defensive end is going to be Olivier Vernon. He's going to be backed up by also veteran Adrian Claiborne, who's added this offseason, and also Porter Gustin and Joe Jackson. Moving into the interior of the defensive line, you have Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi, and then rookie Jordan Elliott, who had a strong training camp. You can expect him to play well. And then also another waiver claim after the 53-man roster, Vincent Taylor will be along in the interior of the defensive line as well. Now, looking at the linebacker core, this was one of the big questions of the Browns during training camp and who they believe was going to be able to step up. Unfortunately, Mack Wilson, one of the starters from last year, isn't going to be available this week. So you can expect rookie from LSU, Jacob Phillips, to step in his place. Jacob Phillips, strong tackler, strong in the run game, does have a little bit of issues in the coverage game, but you can expect him to come in, play well as a rookie. And of course, you can expect a little bit more of the base sets, expecting Joe Woods to run a little bit, have a little bit more linebackers on the field than we expected earlier in the season, just to combat the fact that we're going to be a little bit short on the defensive backs. Looking at our linebacker position, BJ Goodson essentially is going to be the captain of that defense right in the middle of the field. He's played great during training camp. He showed that he's a leader. He's a veteran. He can play, in coverage. He can defend the run. He can pass rush a little bit, which is important. So we want to make sure that BJ Goodson is in the middle of that defense playing well, backed up by Tay Davis, mostly a special teamer. And then at the Sam linebacker position, you look at Sione Takitaki, a third-round pick from BYU a couple years ago, and also Malcolm Smith. This might be a little bit interchanged. Malcolm Smith better in the coverage game, so you could maybe expect him on passing downs and third down and long situations, with Sione Takitaki going to be in around first and second down, being more suited for run defense. Now going to the secondary, Denzel Ward going to be our lockdown corner. Expect man coverage from him going against Hollywood Brown or Willie Snead. And then we have Terrence Mitchell, who's going to be stepping in place for the injured Greedy Williams. Expect Terrence Mitchell. He's a strong veteran. He knows how to make plays, which is really important. And in the situation that Greedy Williams isn't playing, you can feel very confident that Terrence Mitchell is going to give us some consistent play. And then also we have Robert Jackson, who was just activated from the practice squad. Moving into the slot at the nickelback, you can expect MJ Stewart and Tavier Thomas to be those players that will man those spots and help the Browns play strong. And then lastly, the secondary, we have the safeties. At strong safety, you can expect Carl Joseph to be playing in the box, and then also substituting in with Ronnie Harrison, who was just traded for a fifth-round pick from the Jacksonville Jaguars. A strong player that's a little bit more adept in coverage against tight ends, which would be very helpful, seeing that the Ravens got most of their production from the tight end group last season, and you could expect them to try to replicate that success this season. Now going back further into the secondary, you look at free safety Andrew Sendejo, another veteran on the back end, adept in coverage. Expect him to be that deep free safety in cover three looks. He's basically going to be that last security blanket. You also can mix in Sheldrick Redwine, who also played well in limited snaps last season at the free safety position. Now, I also just want to let you guys know that the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is not directly attributed to the Cleveland Browns organization. This is essentially just for Creative Commons, just so that you guys can come in. We can create dialogue regarding the Browns. This is not directly related to the NFL or the Cleveland Browns. Just want to throw that out there. But this video is sponsored by Focus Clothing, which is a Cleveland-based clothing company, Black-owned business, and they actually have a commercial for us to check out. So again, Focus Clothing is the sponsor of this week's video, and this is one of the commercials that they have.
Who said that t-shirt was only for the summer?
So Focus Clothing, again, is sponsoring this week's video of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Focus Clothing, you can shop their new fall collection at focusclothingcle.com. Focus Clothing, they are more than a brand, so make sure you go ahead and check them out. Let's go ahead and continue into the Ravens depth chart this week. Of course, quarterback Lamar Jackson, you can expect him to be the starting quarterback this week and most likely throughout the season. Backed up by Robert Griffin III, a former Rookie of the Year, used to play for the now Washington football team. And then again, the big step of this whole Ravens offense is their running back core. You can expect to see Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and with Justice Hill being out, again, Ohio State fans, rookie J.K. Dobbins is likely to get some touches this week, but you can expect those running backs to be on the field a lot. And then also they do have fullback Patrick Ricard. Looking at the receiver position, you have Willie Snead IV, Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, Miles Boykins, and then two rookies, Dever Duvernay from Texas, and then Chris Prost. A lot of speed at the receiver group, so you can expect Joe Woods wanting to keep the defensive backs in front of those receivers and limit big plays down the field, which is essentially how the Ravens got a lot of their offensive production last season. Now, also looking at the tight end position, tight ends, you can expect a lot of 12 personnel from the Ravens this week with Mark Andrews, who was essentially one of the best tight ends in the league last year. Obviously, he's not on the level of a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle, but he's right there as one of the better receiving tight ends in the league and is a solid run blocker. And then you also have Nick Boyle, who's going to be more your traditional run blocking tight end. Looking at their offensive line, you have Ronnie Stanley, essentially one of the best offensive tackles in the game. He was actually the second highest rated offensive tackle last season. You have Bradley Bozeman, their left guard. Matt Skura is going to be their center. And you have DJ Fluker, a free agent who they signed this offseason. And then right tackle Orlando Brown, another Oklahoma Sooner that actually played with Baker Mayfield back in college. Now, looking at their defense, they did revamp their defense this offseason. They wanted to make sure that they added players, which is really important in order to basically improve their run defense, which wasn't the best last season. Looking at that, you have Derek Wolfe, who they just signed from the Denver Broncos, who's always been pretty solid in run defense. You have Jaheed Ward, Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams at the nose tackle. And then again, Calais Campbell, huge signing. They was able to essentially trade him for a 5th-round draft pick, and he's one of the better defensive tackles and defensive ends in the league and what he's able to provide for them. And you have Pernell McPhee, Jalen Ferguson as the rush tackle, since they do run a 3-4 base defense. Then you have LJ Fort, Chris Board, and then again, another Ohio State Buckeye, rookie Malik Harrison may get in for some snaps depending on how he falls into the depth chart this week. Then starting in the middle of the defense, we have rookie Patrick Queen, another LSU player who runs more sideline to sideline. He was a 1st-round pick for them. And obviously with that, you look at Jacob Phillips, who started next to them. They both ran around the field a lot, but Patrick Queen a little bit more adept in stopping the run and higher in coverage compared to the Browns' Jacob Phillips. Then also you have Matthew Judon and Tyus Bowser, looking at another rusher on the defensive line, but coming again from a stand-up backer position. Going into the secondary, you look at Marlin Humphrey and Marcus Peters, one of the better cornerback duos in the NFL, both very strong players in man coverage, very physical, and also come in to run support as well. They re-signed Anthony Everett, another outside corner. Then you look at their nickel backs, Jimmy Smith and Tavon Young, one of the stronger slot corners in the NFL. So you can definitely expect the Browns to have to work hard in order to get around those defensive backs for the Baltimore Ravens. Then you also have Chuck Clark, safety, and then Anthony Levine, who they re-signed. And then obviously the biggest change, they released Earl Thomas this offseason, so you can expect Deshaun Elliott to step into that role, also with Geno Stone. Now, moving over to the team schemes, you're looking at the Cleveland Browns scheme, the offensive scheme. You can expect a lot of 12 personnel. With that, that's going to be one running back, 2 tight ends, but you also can expect them to bring in a fullback as well. In some situations to run 22 personnel, but a lot of 12 personnel, which is essentially 2 tight ends. So in pretty much most of the game, you can expect to see either Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant, or Austin Hooper and David Njoku. And they might even go 13 personnel where they have 3 tight ends on the field with Hooper, Harrison Bryant, and David Njoku, even Steven Carlson, if they decided to go 14. Like I said, the creativity in this scheme is going to be very important, but it's all going to start on its foundation, which is the wide zone run. And you can expect the Browns to utilize a lot of play action, because if you can pound the rock, if you can pound the ball, you can expect them to do a lot on the ground. And when you can establish the run, play action opens up things for down the field. Now, switching over to the Browns defensive scheme, you can expect them for their base to run a 4-3 under, which is going to be similar to what Joe Woods ran for the Denver Broncos, which was a 3-4 under. Essentially, what changes is instead of having stand-up linebackers, you have a down defensive lineman rushing from the edge, and you have 3 backers, predominantly 2 off the ball. But given what the Browns really want to do when they drafted Grant Delpit and the signing of Ronnie Harrison, is you can expect a little bit more of 4-2-6, 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 6 defensive backs, or essentially a big nickel package where you have in an extra safety versus an extra, a 4-2-5, not 4-2-6. You can expect in an extra safety rather than an extra cornerback. And then essentially with that, you can expect blitz packages from the Browns and Joe Woods' defense, but most of that pressure is going to be generated up front through the front 4 of Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, Adrian Claiborne, Sheldon Richardson, and Larry Ogunjobi, with a little bit of Jordan Elliott. It's going to be similar to what essentially the 49ers did last year, and by the fact that they allowed their front 4 to rush the passer and to really get down the field and to generate pressure in the backfield. Now, switching over to the Baltimore Ravens and their scheme, you can expect a very run-heavy, again, 12 personnel where they have 2 tight ends with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. But they'll also probably go into a little bit more 11 personnel, is what you have 3 receivers and only 1 tight end, seen by the fact that they did lose Hayden Hurst and his 500 snaps after trading him to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, with the Ravens, their offense, they did have the second most tight end receptions last season with 132. So Lamar Jackson does like targeting his tight ends. If Ronnie Harrison, B.J. Goodson, Jedrick Wheels, and Carl Joseph Anderson-Dayo can cover these tight ends in the open in the middle of the field, the Browns can have a more adept chance of containing that offensive passing attack. But again, that offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens is strong. They had the 3rd highest run block grade by Pro Football Focus and the highest pass block grade last season. And again, they were the number 1 offense, which is built around the offensive line. And everyone knows in order to win games, you have to win in the trenches. So it's going to be a very big game for the Browns and their defensive line. Now, looking at the Ravens and their defensive scheme, they are a blitz-heavy 3-4 defensive front. The Ravens actually led this league in blitz rate last season, blitzing 41% of the time. So you can expect them to be attacking Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield last season was actually one of the highest blitz quarterbacks last season. He was in the top 5. So you can expect him to continue that. And they actually led the league as well in 6- and 7-man pressures. So you can expect a lot of times them sending 5-, 6-, or 7-man blitzes to try to get to the quarterback as quick as possible. Obviously having a strong secondary, they can do that. But in a situation, you look at Deshaun Elliott, a player that doesn't have as many reps and isn't a veteran player like Earl Thomas or Tony Jefferson, who they both lost this offseason. You can expect some mistakes in the back end. And if they can dominate in the run game, you can expect the Browns to make some big plays down the field with either Odell, similar to last year with Ricky Seals Jr., but with Austin Hooper or Harrison Bryant down the field off of that play action. Now, some matchups to watch for this week's game. You want to be looking at the Browns defensive line versus the Ravens offensive line. One of the things about this is that the Browns defensive line has to contain the edge. Being able to contain the edge and keeping Lamar Jackson in the pocket as much as possible. Obviously, he was the MVP last year, so you're just not going to stop him completely, but you want to do as much as you can in order to limit what he can do outside of the pocket, limit those scrambles. And then also with the Browns defensive line is that you want to maintain the run fits. Last season, the Ravens had Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram as the most efficient running backs according to Next Gen Stats. Meaning essentially they were the most north and south runners last season. So they don't spend a lot of time behind the offensive line. They run north and south. They get upfield, and that's essentially how the Baltimore Ravens maintain drives with their run game. And we have to make sure that the Browns don't get too far upfield when they are trying to get toward the quarterback, if it's a draw or a type of option play. But you want to make sure that they maintain the run fit, stay in their gaps, and allow the run back to come up and fill those gaps to limit the Ravens' run game as much as possible. Now, moving over to the next matchup, you want to be looking at the Browns running backs and the Ravens linebackers. Essentially with this, the Browns need to challenge the second level of the Ravens defense. Again, there's a lot of questions regarding their linebackers. Patrick Queen, yes, he's a great player, but at the same time, he is a rookie, and there wasn't a training camp that included preseason games. So there likely to be some tackling issues, both on the Brown side as well. And I feel whichever team can have more consistent tackling and limit big runs down the field has a higher chance of winning this game, because obviously both teams are very talented, and it's not just going to be a one-sided affair. Now, if Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt can get to the second level, they are actually in the top 5. Nick Chubb is number 1 since 2018. And then also Kareem Hunt is pretty high on that list as well. Obviously, he was suspended for 8 games last season. But with that, they are some of the best players in open field and in open space as running back. So expect them to come in and make some plays as much as possible. So the Browns running backs definitely need to take advantage against those Ravens linebackers, whether be running the ball or catching the ball out of the backfield. And then lastly, an important matchup to look out for is going to be the Browns receivers versus the Ravens cornerbacks. And essentially, this is the best versus the best. You look at the Browns position group, you have Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, some of the top receivers in the NFL, versus Marlin Humphrey and Marcus Peters, who are arguably some of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. So the Browns receivers have to be in sync. They have to have great chemistry with Baker Mayfield, whether it be on those timing routes, whether it be on play action, or even just quick routes down the field. We want to get them in open space and making sure they're getting that yak, the yards after catch. And those are going to be the things that help the Browns get drives down the field and continue those first downs and continue those drives running. And then also just looking at that third wide receiver position versus their nickelback, Rashard Higgins or Donovan Peoples-Jones definitely have to take advantage of either Jimmy Smith or Anthony Levine or Tavon Young. You know, your third receiver in the depth chart, understanding that there won't be a lot of 11 personnel, they have to take advantage of those opportunities when they're on the field. Now, again, team matchups. Most important position on the field, quarterback. And it's tough to say, but this may be a situation where the Ravens may have a slightly better quarterback than the Browns, just given based off the performances last season. Obviously, Baker Mayfield, a much better pocket passer than Lamar Jackson. Looking at Baker Mayfield last season, had over 3,800 passing yards, but again, just suffered from a lot of inefficiency when he was on the field, throwing for 22 touchdowns, but basically countering that with 21 interceptions. In order for Mayfield to be successful this season, he definitely has to limit on his turnovers, and that means limiting the amount of interceptions that he has. Now, you look at his PFF grades. He had an overall grade of 73.7 overall with a 71.7 passing grade. Those are definitely things that he can expect to get up this season. But when he is on the road, Baker Mayfield is very adept at either running that run-pass option, the RPO. The Browns were one of the top teams and by far one of the best teams last season at running RPO. So you can expect that wrinkle being added to the game with Baker Mayfield's quick decision-making. But also, he's very well at play-action passing, which the Browns can expect to utilize a lot this game. And he had 11 passing touchdowns on play-action last season. And then also, which is a very important stat, and he was actually one of the few quarterbacks to do this. Actually, he may be the only one based off of Pro Football Focus. Last season, Baker Mayfield had an 80-plus passing grade versus a blitz. Now, this is huge against the Baltimore Ravens, seeing by the fact they're one of the highest blitzing teams in the NFL last season. So you can expect them to definitely blitz, but as long as Baker Mayfield can stay calm under pressure and the Browns offensive line can provide a cleaner pocket, you can expect Baker Mayfield to excel in that role playing against the blitz and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, looking at Lamar Jackson and his performance last season, again, an MVP season, basically historic. He threw for over 3,100 passing yards, also had 1,200 yards rushing on the ground with 36 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. I mean, his PF grades are just undeniable. 91 passing grade overall, or overall grade, 85 passing grade, and 90 rushing grade on the ground. One of the things with Lamar Jackson and their offense with Coach Harbaugh is that they like to give him design runs, whether it be a QB power or QB draw, a QB option. They like to use Lamar Jackson's legs. And again, this comes back to the Browns defensive line and maintaining that edge in their run fits, because you can expect around 6 to 8 per game of design runs for Lamar Jackson, seen by the fact that he ran for over 700 yards on just design runs. So if the Browns can limit that, I feel like they can limit the effectiveness of Lamar Jackson. And again, just based off the fact that Lamar Jackson did have MVP season, going to have to give a slight edge to the Baltimore Ravens for the quarterback position. But moving over to the running back position, you look at the Browns. This is definitely something where they have a slight advantage versus the Baltimore Ravens because of the talent they have in the running back room. But then again, the Baltimore Ravens running back group is no group of slouches. Looking at the running back position, Nick Chubb had over 1,400 yards last season, averaged 5 yards per carry with a Pro Bowl season, a 90.3 rushing grade, the highest overall, and he had the highest overall grade by Pro Football Focus with 88.7 of all running backs. Had a great season. And then you look at Kareem Hunt. He's going to be that third down back coming in and can run the ball well. Don't forget, he led the league in rushing in 2017 as a rookie with the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a 76.7 grade overall in 8 games. And again, he excels catching the ball out of the backfield with 83.4 receiving grade by Pro Football Focus. Looking at the back end of the running back group, you also have Ernest Johnson, who catches the ball well out of the backfield, and he actually won the position over Dontrell Hilliard in the training camp. So you can expect Ernest Johnson to potentially get a couple carries or a few touches out of the backfield. Looking at the Baltimore Ravens, you have Mark Ingram, again, another Pro Bowler. He ran for over 1,000 yards, also had a 5-yard per carry average. So he's a strong running back. Again, he's just overall a well player, 78.7 overall grade. He performed very well above average for both rushing and receiving out of the backfield. And again, him and Gus Edwards, some of the most efficient players in the league with their rushing attack. They get north and south. This is the most important thing for the Browns defensive line. You have to maintain those run fits. If they don't stay in the run fits, that causes issues for players that run north and south because they don't spend a lot of time behind the offensive line. They get the ball and they just churn those yards, keep their legs moving, and that's what really helps them get down the field. And then also you do have J.K. Dobbins, who had over 1,000 yards in the collegiate season last year for the Ohio State Buckeyes. You can definitely expect him to get some touches and carries this game, especially with Justice Hill being out. So also we got to be on the lookout for Justice Hill. But I'm still going to give the running back who you got to the Browns. Obviously, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, the best running back duo in the NFL by far. Expect him to have a big game. Now, moving over to the wide receiver position, the wide receivers for the Browns are very strong. Obviously, without a doubt, this is going to be an easy selection of who to pick between the Browns and the Ravens. The Browns have Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. Both had over 1,000 yards receiving. Jarvis Landry made it to another Pro Bowl, back-to-back Pro Bowl since joining the Browns, and is a great player at that Z position, being able to line up on the outside, on the strong side of the formation, or even in the slot. And he actually had a very good yak last season. His yards of expectation based off where he caught the ball and his yards per reception were over a yard compared to what it was expected based on the players that was around him. So he's very well at catching the ball, making that first defender miss and getting down the field and help moving the chains. He had huge third down catches last season, and you can expect that to continue. And then also looking at Odell Beckham Jr., He's a lot healthier. Obviously, last season, he had the hernia and a groin issue. He's been looking healthy all training camp. You can expect him to come in. Now, one of the things that I am expecting from Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham this season is more chemistry. Obviously, last year, you could kind of tell that they were out of sync and things weren't really flowing the way we were expecting them to. But with that just comes by the fact that sometimes when a player has an injury and, the training camp, they're not really there. That was a discussion last season. All those things are out of the window. He's healthy. We saw the plays during training camp. He's ready to go. And one of the things I expect to kind of shift from last season was the team's share of air yards. Essentially, down the field, who was giving the most production. And last season, about 43% of that production was coming from Jarvis Landry down the field. Now, obviously, Jarvis Landry being more of a possession receiver, you would expect him to be making plays underneath in the intermediate parts of the field. Now, you can expect Odell Beckham to come in and make those big plays down the field. If we're going to give a comparison, obviously, Kevin Stefanski coming from Minnesota, you look at Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, expect Odell Beckham to fulfill that Diggs role, getting those big plays down the field, post routes, corner routes, seams, fades. Those are going to be the routes where Odell Beckham should get a lot of his big chunk yardage this season in this game. And then obviously you switch it over, you look at, the Ravens. They have a lot of speed, but they don't have a lot of veteran production or really just consistent production at the receiver position. You look at Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, had 580 yards, but he had 7 touchdowns. With Marquise Brown, the biggest thing is you need to make sure you always have a player deep. You look at Andrew Sendejo, Sheldrick Redwine. These are going to be the safeties that need to make sure on the back end they're not making mistakes, because if you make those mistakes, that 4.3 speed that Marquise Brown has, he will definitely make you pay, and the Browns can't afford to have miscommunications on the back end if they want to limit what Brown does. And you look at Willie Snead and Miles Boykin. These are bigger receivers with speed. I mean, you look at Miles Boykin, he's 6'4", running a 4.3. Players with that size and speed combination obviously are a threat down the field. And the Ravens definitely plan on attacking the field vertically, because that's what Lamar Jackson is most adept at, is making throws outside of the numbers, rather be outs, corners, and then, of course, down the seam, attacking his tight ends. Moving to the tight end group as well. This is a tough one. The reason why I feel like this is tough, because the Browns obviously made improvements for the tight end group, but it's still kind of a bit of an unknown, because you look at Austin Hooper, it's his first year with the team. David Njoku kind of was in Freddie Kitchens' doghouse, so he didn't really get much production or much playing time last season. And then again, Harrison Bryant was a rookie compared to the Ravens, who had guaranteed veteran production, and you pretty much know what to expect by the fact that they target their tight ends a lot, being in 12 personnel. But again, just breaking it down, Austin Hooper had a Pro Bowl season last year, had 6 touchdowns and over 75 receptions. But looking at Austin Hooper, 75% of Hooper's production came against the zone or underneath routes since 2016. And he leads the league by a wide margin of production in that area. So obviously Austin Hooper is not going to be a world beater. You're not going to expect him just to be dominating people in man coverage. He's a player that knows how to find the soft spots in the zone, and he's adept at finding those zone coverages. When you look at Austin Hooper, he's going to be a short-handed player. He has over 80% catch rate, so you can expect him to be shorthand. So on third down, we can expect Baker Mayfield to look at him a lot. Then you go to Harrison Bryant and David Njoku. David Njoku is going to be more of your traditional move tight end, but again, he's had some issues with the dropsies. Obviously, this season, there was a little bit of talk of him wanting to be moved because he didn't feel like he's going to get a lot of playing time given the system, whatever the case may be. But if Njoku wants to get paid like we expect him to, obviously the team, Andrew Berry exercised that team option to give him another season with the team. He has to catch the ball. If he catches the ball and he proves to be adept at the tight end position, he could likely get a contract, even if it's not with the Browns after next season. He has to play well in order to get that contract that he believes he deserves. And then obviously Harrison Bryant had an extremely strong training camp. You can expect him to come in, make some tough catches, and he's going to be more of that tight end that can stretch the seam. And he's going to be that person that you can expect to be in the intermediate and deep parts of the field as a more traditional, H-back tight end. Now, looking at the Ravens and their tight end, you can see it right there. Mark Andrews at the top of the list. He had their highest production of any receiver / tight end for the Ravens last season. He had over 850 yards and double-digit touchdowns, and he also made a Pro Bowl, one of the better tight ends in the league. And then obviously his receiving and his run blocking was great as well. Now, you look at Nick Boyle, who's more of a traditional inline tight end. Nick Boyle is a player I definitely believe is going to surprise a lot of people. Nick Boyle last season actually had a 75 graded run block percentage by Pro Football Focus. So whatever side he's on, you can definitely expect him with either Ronnie Stanley or Orlando Brown to help essentially steal that edge, whether it be against Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, or whatever linebackers are coming into the area. And he also had over 300 yards. Now, again, the question comes down to, are they going to be able to replace that production that was left by Hayden Hurst trading him to the Atlanta Falcons? With that, I believe, based off of what they drafted with Devin Duvernay and Chris Prost, that you're going to see a little bit more 11 personnel with 3 receivers, with Mark Andrews likely being that tight end on the field when they're not in 12 personnel. So with that, I believe that the Browns have the slightest edge versus the Ravens in which group is better for the tight ends. I'm going to give the edge because, one, Austin Hooper, he was working with Baker Mayfield this offseason. They were building that chemistry. Harrison Bryant showed some strong play in the training camp, and we're expecting a improvement in production for David Njoku. Just understanding that they have 3 receiving tight ends, and we're going to run a lot of 12 personnel this game, I would give a slight edge to the Browns and their tight end group. Now, moving over to the offensive line in the trenches, this is tough, and I'm kind of sad that I have to do this, but I have to give it to the Baltimore Ravens, unfortunately. Now, Browns fans, don't attack me. Don't hurt me. It's okay. The Browns and their offensive line, they do play well. Obviously, you look at their offensive line, and they have some great players there. You look at Jack Conklin, who graded very well, one of the best right tackles in the game. You look at Joe Betonio, who has been a staple, has always been in the top 10 for highest graded offensive guards. You have J.C. Treader. Again, he was questionable coming into this game, so I feel like the health of his knee is one of the most important things when it comes down to how well he performs, because obviously you have to be healthy. But I do believe, even in the situation that he didn't play a lot or have a lot of reps during training camp, him being a veteran, he'll be able to step in and perform well, because communication is very important along the offensive line. And he's essentially that person that translates those messages from Baker Mayfield to the rest of the offensive line. Then you look at Wyatt Teller and Jedrick Wheels, essentially the 2 unknowns of the offensive line. With that, I do believe that Wyatt Teller should have a strong game, but he's going to have to go against the likes of Brandon Williams. Brandon Williams did have a down season last year compared to his past, but Brandon Williams has made it to the Pro Bowls. He's been a strong run presence, being that nose, so it's definitely going to be important that Wyatt Teller improves on his run blocking, but given the positive reinforcement that offensive line coach Bill Callahan has gave during training camp, you can expect Wyatt Teller to improve. But again, he's more adept at pass sets, so you can at least expect during passing plays when Calais Campbell or someone kicks in, Derek Wolfe kicks on the inside, that he'll be a little bit more confident. Of course, he has the help of J.C. Treader as well. Now, switching over to the Ravens, again, it's kind of hard not to give it to the team that was the best rated offensive line last season. They have essentially everyone from last season, but they lost the biggest piece and essentially one of the best guards in the NFL, in Marshall Yanda, who's essentially a lock to make it to the Hall of Fame. That's going to be hard to replicate and reproduce. That production is gone, and essentially that security blanket on the right side of their offensive line. And they didn't really replace it with anything spectacular. DJ Fluker hasn't really been much of anything, during his time as an offensive lineman. Now, I mean, it sucks for me to say this, but he's graded pretty below average at both pass blocking and run blocking. So if you look at that, we know which part of the offensive line they want to attack. But again, they have a very strong offensive line with a lot of players returning. You look at Ronnie Stanley, who's a great player. Bradley Bozeman also returning to their offensive line. Matt Skura, and then Orlando Brown. So they're returning 4 out of the 5 players they had last season. So that's the reason why I have to give them a slight edge over the Cleveland Browns for the better offensive line. But again, it's tough to replace Marshall Yanda. So eyes are definitely going to be on DJ Fluker, and I expect the Browns to attack him either with blitzes, with Joe Woods, however he decides to attack the offensive line. But we all know that Fluker is going to be the weak spot of that offensive line. But at the same time, still have to give them the edge. So continue to who you got. Let's keep it on the DL, the defensive line, not the down low. We're going to be looking at the Browns defensive line. Now, the Browns defensive line, I feel like is one of the better groups in the league. You look at Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, then you also have Adrian Claiborne at that defensive end position. Porter Goodson is also going to be a rotational defensive end. He's going to come in and provide some very good athleticism and speed. Obviously, he was selected on the roster over 3rd-round pick from 2018, Chad Thomas, who's no longer with the team. So obviously they have high expectations of Porter Goodson as a rotational end. But you look at Myles Garrett, 91.6 pass rushing grade. The man was an absolute beast in the 10 games that he played, and you can expect another dominant season from Myles Garrett. He got a huge extension this offseason, and expect him to get after the quarterback and definitely collapse that pocket. But it's also important, again, even though it may be a passing down, staying in those lanes when they're rushing the passer and keeping the edges contained against Lamar Jackson will be very important for his defensive end group. Now, going into the interior defensive line, you have Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi. Now, Sheldon Richardson had a very strong season. He plays well in run defense, grading over 75 at a 75 grade last season. And Larry Ogunjobi, he's on a contract year, or essentially upcoming, a contract year, excuse me. He's in a situation where he really has to perform because after next season, you're in a situation where you have to essentially pay for a contract. But if you play well, you can get that contract extension sooner, or maybe a team decides, him as a trade, or whatever the case may be. Now, Larry Ogunjobi is more adept at rushing the passer in the interior, having over 5.5 sacks each season. I'm expecting him to have a bounce back year. Obviously, he's been working really hard in the offseason and during training camp. So I'm really hoping that Larry Ogunjobi from Charlotte plays well. And actually, fun fact, we signed another player from Charlotte. Curtis Weaver. But another player that the Browns did sign around the interior, but he's on the IR right now. But looking at a player that I feel should have a big game, especially rushing from the interior, is going to be Jordan Elliott. Now, Jordan Elliott, they drafted from Missouri, was actually the number 23. So the Browns in their first 3 picks had 3 players in the top 25 of Pro Football Focus big board for the NFL draft. And Jordan Elliott had a very strong training camp. So you can expect him to come in, and he's going to be that player that provides a lot of pass rushing production. Since 2018 for his collegiate career, he had over 92 grade by Pro Football Focus. So he's definitely really adept at rushing at the interior, and he actually had the highest grade of SEC interior players. So you look at Javon Kinlaw, who was a first-round draft pick for the San Francisco 49ers. He actually graded higher than him and Derek Brown out of the SEC. So we could expect some good play from Jordan Elliott on the interior. Now you look at the Baltimore Ravens and their offensive line. It's pretty tough to argue their defensive line because look at who they have. Calais Campbell, who they got on the extreme cheap for only a 5th-round pick. So you're getting a player essentially that is one of the better defensive ends / defensive tackles playing in the interior of the defensive line. And you also have Derek Wolfe, who has always graded around average to slightly above average in the run game, but he also can rush the passer as well. And then again, you have Brandon Williams. But for this, I got the Cleveland Browns. You look at Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, you look at Sheldon Richardson, that 3 of the front 4 is extremely solid. And at the end of the day, your defensive line, I'm going to go with the group that has 4, strong players versus, a team that uses a 3-4 rushing or passing attack. So again, I'm going to give this I'm going to give it to the Browns for the better defensive line for this matchup. Now, moving over to the linebackers, it's kind of weakness versus weakness. The Ravens were very weak. Excuse me. Were very weak last season in their linebacking core. Obviously, they didn't stop the run very well, so they had to reinvigorate that position. But the Browns, on the same token, they're suffering from an injury, losing Mack Wilson, and they have a lot of unproven players. So you look at Jacob Phillips. He had an 88 tackling grade last season, which is really good, from a collegiate standpoint by Pro Football Focus. So it definitely shows that he's a sure tackler. And if you're a real Browns fan, we all know since 2016, the Browns aren't the greatest when it comes to tackling. Joe Schobert obviously led the team the last 2 seasons, the leading tackler in the middle of that defense, but he also had some tackling inconsistencies that kind of reared its ugly head sometimes during the season. So you can definitely expect an improvement, with Jacob Phillips likely, and BJ Goodson as well. BJ Goodson obviously is going to be that starting middle linebacker. Obviously, his PFF grades are relatively average, but again, he did have a strong training camp, so you're going to expect an improvement, in the middle of that defense versus, losing Joe Schobert to free agency, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to assess of which player is going to get the most play. But I'm expecting Sione Takitaki likely to get the most reps this week and probably likely throughout the season because, one, he's going to be more adept in the run defense. Obviously, he has a 75.1 rush defensive grade by Pro Football Focus, and you're playing against the Baltimore Ravens. You have to stop the run. And again, that's that run fits. If he's able to control the edge and force everything back inside, if they do decide to run, like outside zone or some type of read option with Lamar Jackson and the running backs, you need a player that can maintain that edge, force everything inside. And if the defensive line is able to maintain the run fits, I feel like the Browns linebacking core could have a better game this week. Also, you look at Malcolm Smith, a veteran. He was the Super Bowl MVP for the Seahawks when they did win. He's more adept at coverage, so a linebacker that can play in space. So in a situation that they're going to go a little bit more base than the 4-2-5 defense, you could expect Malcolm Smith to be on some of those passing downs. Now you switch that over and you look at Baltimore Ravens and their linebacking core. They're more adept at rushing the passer more than they are at coverage. You look at Pernell McPhee and Jalen Ferguson. This is essentially, you can expect them to be rushing on almost every down. On the base, you want at least 4 players going after the quarterback or maintaining the run fits on defense. So you can expect a lot of veteran Pernell McPhee. Obviously, he suffered from an injury last season, but he's actually performed well in the running game with the 80.3 run defensive grade by PFF. Now you go to the middle of the field. You look at the wheel. You have veteran LJ Fort, who's a little bit better overall. As a linebacker, he's just solid. They have Chris Board, and then, of course, they have Ohio State Buckeye Malik Harrison. And then you have rookie Patrick McQueen, a first-round pick from LSU, someone that flies around the field. He plays in coverage, and obviously he's going to be a very strong player for them. And then you have Matthew Judon, one of the better pass rushers in the league. In run defense, not so much, but Matthew Judon has also been one of those players that has been pretty consistent at rushing the passer and providing that pass rush for the Baltimore defense. And they also have Tyus Bowser as well, a younger player who's more adept at rushing the passer. So I'm going to have to give the slight edge to the Baltimore Ravens and their linebacking core. Even though their linebackers aren't really adept at coverage, they do have some players that are solid in run defense, and they also have players that are pretty well performing in pass rush. So I'm going to just have to give it to the Ravens, one, because they're returning most of their group and they added another player with Patrick Queen. But you know what to expect from the linebackers. They're going to be rushing the passer. I mean, you look at Terrell Suggs. Terrell Suggs was a menace for the Browns offense for almost a decade, and it's obvious they want their linebackers to rush the quarterback. So I'm going to have to give the edge to the Baltimore Ravens in their linebacking core. Now, going to the cornerbacks, you're looking at essentially the best duo versus a weakened Brown secondary. So, I mean, it's not going to be too hard to really determine who has a better group of these two. You look at the Browns, obviously, they don't have Greedy Williams, so you have Terrence Mitchell stepping in for him. You look at Denzel Ward, who's going to be our best corner, our number one corner. Expect him to follow, Hollywood Brown or, Devin Duvernay or Willie Snead around the field sometimes, but I expect him to be on Brown more times than not this week, just seeing by the fact that they're so weakened in the secondary. And then also you have MJ Stewart at that nickelback role. So hopefully him, Tavier Thomas, they can come in and step up in the absence of Kevin Johnson and Greedy Williams. Now you switch over to the Baltimore Ravens and their cornerbacks, and it's obvious. They have the better cornerback duo with Marlin Humphreys and Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters was one of the highest graded cornerbacks. I actually is missing the graphic, so my apologies about that. Uploaded the wrong one. But when you look at Marlin Humphreys, he's actually a top 10 corner in the NFL. I understand that Pro Football Grades, he grades relatively just slightly above average, but Pro Football Focus is more of a substitute, not the end-all be-all when it comes to assessing a player and their ability. Marlon Humphreys is one of the top players. He has a very low passer rating when targeted. And then you look at Marcus Peters on the opposite end of the field, traded last season from the LA Rams. And it's obvious Marcus Peters, he's physical, he plays in man coverage, and he actually was the third highest rated cornerback by Pro Football Focus last year with an 83.9 grade and an 86.6 in coverage. So you obviously can expect Marcus Peters to perform well, and he's feisty. That's what you need on the cornerbacks for the Baltimore Ravens, especially given that they're weaker in this secondary with their safeties. And then, of course, they have Jimmy Smith, who returns from injury, and they have Tavon Young at the nickelback as well. So obviously, I'm going to have to give this one to the Baltimore Ravens and their cornerback position group. Obviously, you can expect them to run some dime as well, or you can expect Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, and Tavon Young on the field at the same time. Now, moving over to the safeties, this one, it's pretty easy to give. I mean, it's the Browns. Even with the Browns having a little bit more depth issues now because Grant Delpit is on IR, they still have the better group. It's pretty simple. You look at Carl Joseph, Andrew Sendejo, two veteran players. Carl Joseph, obviously, a former first-round pick for the now Las Vegas Raiders. And then Andrew Sendejo, a veteran that's performed well both with the Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings, and is reunited with defensive backs coach Joe Woods from Minnesota, who's now the Browns defensive coordinator. And you look at Ronnie Harrison, who was just recently added via trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then you have fourth-round draft pick from last season, Jedrick Wheels, who performed well in coverage last season. Now, when you look at them, a lot of these players are more adept at coverage more than they are at run defense. So it is going to be really important that Carl Joseph, who's actually more adept in playing in the box, one of the better safeties in the NFL, in that role, you could expect him to play in the box a lot and help provide more containment for the run game for the Cleveland Browns in that defense and that front seven, adding another player. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of 8-man in the box this week with Andrew Sendejo or Jedrick Wheels as the deep players in that secondary. Now you look at the Baltimore Ravens and who they have at that position. You just don't really feel confident in that group. You cut Tony Jefferson to save some money, and then you also release Earl Thomas. You're losing two veterans, two very strong players in the secondary for essentially Chuck Clark. But again, Chuck Clark was one of the players that blitzed the most last season. So you can expect him to relatively perform very well. Obviously, he had a 77.9 coverage grade last season, so he plays well in space in that deep third of the field. And you just hope that with him being such a blitz player at that strong safety position, the Browns are able to communicate in order to prevent those blitzes from coming in. That's really the biggest part about all of this is, are they able to pick up on the blitz, communicate and understand who the blitzes are, because obviously Harbaugh in that defense, he's going to try to mix up the blitz packages in the scheme of who the Browns offensive line believe is being sent. But I do feel confident that Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb or even Ernest Johnson, when he's in the game, they're very adept at pass blocking, out of the backfield to help give Baker Mayfield some more time. And you look at Deshaun Elliott. Deshaun Elliott is going to be the starting free safety after them releasing Earl Thomas, and only played 40 snaps last season. So you look at that, and I feel he's that weak part of that defense. Now, obviously, only playing 40 snaps, they don't have a lot of tape on him from last season. So I'm hoping that they're able to utilize that play action down the field and really attack Elliott, whether it be, outside of the numbers, the intermediate part of the field with Austin Hooper or Harrison Bryant and down the seams. They have to find a way in order to attack Chuck Clark and Elliott, because these players are going to be the ones that are the weaker links of the secondary for the Ravens. Now, the overall secondary for the Ravens, I'll have to give them the slight nod for overall group just because their cornerbacks are so well. And when you have a dime package, you're running four cornerbacks in the first place. But again, those safeties are a little bit questionable. Chuck Clark didn't have the greatest pro football focus grade in the run defense. So if, again, Nick Chubb getting to that second level, that was one of the matchups to watch, was the Browns running backs versus the Ravens linebackers, and really just getting to that second level. Expecting Chuck Clark to be inside of the box, I believe that Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt have the skill and ability to make him miss in the open space in order to get additional yards and making sure that they're getting a lot of yards after contact. Now, again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is not directly attributed by the Cleveland Browns or NFL. This is essentially just Creative Commons so that we can open dialogue. Let me know what you guys are thinking about the show. Again, this is the first show that I have done for the Browns Tailgate Show. The naming really is just for the relation so that people know. Again, not directly related to the Browns or the NFL. But again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing, a Cleveland-based Black-owned clothing company here in Cleveland, and they're the sponsor for this week's video. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys another sneak preview of Focus Clothing here in Cleveland. So, again, I just want to thank you guys for checking out the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. You guys can give the socials a follow. My name is Sean Stevenson. That's SHWN Stevenson on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those. So let's go back into the final comparison of the Who You Got. Now, this one hurts my soul a lot because the Browns have a really good special teams group, but they have one big issue. They're young. They're unproven. You look at Austin Seibert, a great kicker, really strong in his kicking game, has a great leg. He hit a few field goals last season from beyond 50 yards, and he's consistent. Now, obviously, it's a new season. We're just hoping that he can continue this consistency. They do have Cody Parkey, who is a protected player this week on the practice squad. Teams are allowed now 4 protected players on the practice squad from Tuesday to game day. After Monday, they can be poached, but obviously Cody Parkey was a player that the Browns decided to add in the situation that if something does go wrong with Austin Seibert, but he didn't go through a training camp competition. So we're hoping that he's able to perform. Obviously, he broke out the mullet this offseason, so you're hoping that he performs well. That's really important. If he's able to perform well, you can expect the Browns to do a lot of good things in terms of the kicking game. And then you look at the Scottish Hammer. I mean, I feel Jamie Gillan is one of the best young punters in the NFL. The man has an absolute cannon for a leg, but I guess in this case, an absolute hammer. So, he has the tools to be a really good punter in this league. He's left-footed, and that actually throws off a lot of returners. I don't know if any of you guys watch the Patriots too much. I know, a lot of people don't like the Patriots, but you look at Bill Belichick, who's one of the greatest offensive minds and special teams minds, or excuse me, defensive minds and special teams minds in the game in terms of how he schemes up things. Bill Belichick has utilized left-footed punters for a long time, and one of the biggest things that he talked about is the fact that with left-footed punters, it actually makes the trajectory of the ball different for punt returners. Sometimes they can lose where the ball is going, which can cause an issue. Rather they lose the ball in the sun or they misjudge it. That actually can help out the Browns a lot for the special teams unit, because if a player misjudges the ball, that gives the gunners like Tavier Thomas or Cordero Hodge to get down the field and to, down the ball with inside the 10 or around the goal line. So, which is really nice. And you can expect the Scottish Hammer to probably have another good game. Now, the reason why I can't give it to the Browns for the better special teams group is because the Baltimore Ravens have Justin Tucker. The man's a Hall of Famer. He's the best kicker in the league, and you can guarantee if it comes down to it, Browns fans, we better hope, we better play, we better get the blowing at the TV if this man has to kick the game-winning field goal for the Ravens, because the man's money. It's tough. And when you look at Justin Tucker, you can almost count on him for essentially anything. He's the Adam Vinatieri in the Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens. I definitely believe Justin Tucker is going to go down as the greatest kicker of all time, and it just sucks that he happens to be in the AFC North and paying for the Baltimore Ravens. But the one thing you can't do is be biased. He's good, and he just happens to pay for a team that we don't like. So, and then you look at their punter, Sam Kolk, who's, one of the best punters in the NFL as well, who's made Pro Bowls. Obviously, he didn't punt a lot last year because when you're scoring, what do you need to punt the ball for? But, when he does punt, a lot of his punts land inside of the 20, and he's another veteran. So, obviously, you have a future Hall of Famer, a former Pro Bowl veteran punter versus two younger players that are essentially unproven. You got to give the nod to them. Now, on the return game, I'm giving it to the Browns. JoJo Natson, who they signed from the Los Angeles Rams, he's a player that they trusted enough to give him a roster spot for the return game. So kick returns, punt returns, expect JoJo Natson to come in. The guy's only 175 pounds, but the boy has some wheels. Like, you can expect him to be going fast down those lanes. And essentially, they believe he could be what the Browns had in Josh Cribbs. Josh Cribbs is a Cleveland Browns legend. If you watch any of the Cleveland Browns training camp this offseason, whether it be through YouTube Live or online or whatever the case may be, he talked about JoJo Natson and what he provided as a returner. And you look at Josh Cribbs, one of the best returners in NFL history, next to Deion Sanders and Devin Hester. If he believes he has the skill set that's needed to be a great returner, JoJo Natson can definitely do some big things. And also Donovan Peoples-Jones can be used in the punt return and kickoff return game as well, compared to the Ravens, mostly going to be using predominantly Marquise Brown, a smaller player, obviously fast like JoJo Natson. But with him being their number one receiver, you definitely kind of want to limit the potential of him getting hurt. So you can expect potentially Devin Duvernay also doing some of those return duties. So just wrapping up the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, I just want to thank you guys for, all those that tuned in. Again, if you like to check out the tailgate recipe of the week, you can see that on my Instagram. I will have those at the end of the video again, so you can follow me on the socials. It'll be on Twitter and Facebook as well. Apologies about that not having any audio, but again, tailgate recipe of the week is jalapeno bacon buffalo chicken dip. And now just going over the 3 keys to winning the game. The most important key for the Browns this week is containing Lamar Jackson. You're not going to stop him, but you have to contain him. That means maintaining the edge, making sure you turn him into a pocket passer as much as possible. His skill set is someone that you want to use bootlegs, play actions, 5 to 7 step drops. He's not really a player where you're going to be expecting a lot of, 3-step timing routes. He's going to want to attack the field vertically. If you can keep things in front of you, watch the scene with Mark Andrews and play well against those tight ends, I feel like you can limit what Lamar Jackson does best. But again, you don't want to be playing run and chase. This is not a cat and dog chase for Lamar Jackson. You want to maintain those edges. Make sure that you play well against him up front. And as long as the defensive line can create pressure and kind of close that pocket for him, it'll help with the linebackers and kind of finding him and making sure he doesn't get out of the pocket too much. Number two, even though this kind of goes for both teams, tackling. The Browns have to tackle an open field. There were no preseason games. There were limited live tackling sessions during the training camp. So the Browns have to break down and tackle in an open field. We need to make it as simple as possible. Joe Woods, before this game starts, make sure the Browns know they have to go into this and they need 11 hats to the football. Everyone needs to get down the field, tackle. If they can tackle, I feel the defense can have a strong performance, because missed tackles is what really has people go down the field and, make big plays. Miscommunications are going to happen. But if you can tackle and play fast in the case of a miscommunication, it can limit the harm that it can do in a miscommunication. But tackling in an open field and tackling the running backs early on and not allowing players to get freely to the second level is going to be huge. And then I feel like the biggest key for the Browns to win this game, they have to run the ball effectively. There's a big difference between running the ball and running it effectively, because the issue last season wasn't that they weren't running the ball enough with Nick Chubb. They weren't giving it to him at the right time. Hopefully we're not going to see any 3rd-and-9 draw plays from Kevin Stefanski like last season, but we can expect him to hand the ball off a lot to Nick Chubb. Now, this outside zone scheme with Stefanski, who's also going to be calling the plays, just said it late in the week that he's going to be calling the offensive plays so far this season, or at least for this game. You can expect a lot of plays that look very similar. He talked about this offseason, a marriage between the run and the pass of what it looks like for the defense. When you're able to marriage plays similar to what Kyle Shanahan does with the San Francisco 49ers, when an outside zone or inside zone play looks exactly the same as a pass play, it makes the defense just freeze enough. And if the linemen for the Browns can hold up against that strong defensive line, in the run game of the Baltimore Ravens, you can expect Nick Chubb to, break tackles, get down the field. And he's the reason why we won back in week 4 last season. So we win this game on the legs of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb pounding that ball. And if they can do that and control the clock and limit how much time that the Ravens offense is on the field, this gives us a better chance of winning this game. So if I had to just give a final score of what I believe it to be, obviously I'm a Browns fan. I'm going to keep it legit. It doesn't matter if they're favorites or not for the Ravens. The Browns have an opportunity to win this game, but they have to play strong. So I believe 27-24 will be the final score. The Browns will win by a field goal. It doesn't necessarily have to be a game-winning field goal, but if the Browns can control the clock and limit what the Ravens can do down the field with Lamar Jackson and his arm and his legs, the Browns have a very high chance of winning this game. So again, thank you guys to everyone that showed up to the live stream. I really extremely appreciate it. You can give me a follow on the socials in the top left-hand corner, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I do follow back. Also, one of the most important things that I didn't really talk about too much during the stream is that I actually am a contributing writer. I have a column on Sports Illustrated Browns Digest over with Pete Smith and Brandon Little. So make sure you guys go ahead and check that out. Again, that's going to be si.com/NFL/Browns. That's si.com/NFL/Browns. Again, we give daily articles. I'll have weekly columns each week. And that's actually how I got started. So again, I just want to thank you guys for checking out the broadcast. Go Browns, and I will see you guys.